What's up, Battletech fans? This is Travis back with another little card build for the Battletech Trading Card Game, and this one is actually going to be a little bit different than my previous episodes. I'm actually not going to build a card with you. I'm going to take you through a card that I already built, and this was one that I was kind of playing with this weekend, the Masakari Prime, or the Warhawk Prime in my set, because I use the clan names. But this is one that I actually put together several weeks ago, but was revisiting this weekend, as I often do, as I tweak my own formulas and how I figure out the different stacks for the mechs. And there were some really interesting things that came out of this, and I wanted to share with you because it plays a lot into my thoughts and opinions on the larger units in the game and why they are basically unplayable, unworkable in the original game, and exploring some ideas of how to change that for a custom game if you want to play these on your home game or whatever it may be. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let's go through a really quick summary of how I came up with the stats in the build, and then we'll go through the cards I came up with and compare it with the originals. Alright, so here we are. I've got this pulled up, the Warhawk in the Solaris Skunkworks program, just for a quick overview of the stats. So looking at its walking running, we got 4.6, so that's going to make it a slow mech. Tonnage 85, so that's going to be 8.5 tons of internal structure, 20 double heat sinks, so that's a 40 heat sink mitigation or heat mitigation for its primary weapons. And then bumping over to the armor, 13.5 tons. It's going to be ferrofibrous, so we're going to have a 1.2 multiple on that. And that multiple is what we're ultimately going to use for the calculation of what the armor structure is going to be for this mech. Coming over here, there is something a little different, unique here, and so usually I determine the armor structure or the armor value by how many PPC hits it can take into that center torso. Now this is up in the 40s, so it's 42, so that would tell me it would be able to take 4 hits. However, it is unusually weak in the left and right torsos, so we're at 26 on that. And so usually there's not going to be a huge difference between those. Usually it'll be like one will be in the 30s, one will be in the 40s, or one will be in the 20s and one will be in the 30s. So it's not too common for there to be a 20-point difference between those. So what I ended up doing, and I'll show you, is I ended up just compromising and went ahead with a 3 for the armor, especially since that center torso is on the low end of the 40s and the left and right torso are on the higher end of the 20s. And so taking that, let's then bump over to the weapons. And so we got 4 ER PPCs. Those are clan ER PPCs, so they do 15 damage as well as 15 heat. And then we have that LRM 10. All right. Other notable things is the targeting computer on this mech. The targeting computer doesn't have a function in the game, but I like to plug little lines like that, little keywords like that, in case in the future I come up with a good rule for targeting computer, I can use it. All right, and these are fan designs. They're supposed to be fun and look cool, so having an extra ability looks cool. And then the case, we'll note the case. Same thing with the case. There's no special abilities for the case at this point, but if there's ever a card in the future that I want to target case, then it'll be listed on the mech, and the mech can benefit from having that special ability. All right, and we'll hop on over to my Excel sheet and plug all this into the notes. All right, so now let's go over the stats as I plugged them in. All right, and so we have in this line here, we have the internal structure is 8.5 tons, and then we have the external, which is a 16.2 equivalent. All right, so that's that 13.5 times the 1.2 for ferrofibrous armor. And then that came up to 24.7, and generally the armor without fail is going to be the armor divided by 2, or the total tonnage of armor divided by 2, so that's going to bring us to 12, and you're going to round down or up as needed. And so this should be totaling 12, so we got 3 and 9 is where that's putting me. For the attack, we had the 40 heat dissipation, and then I worked and I went back and forth a little bit on how I wanted to split up the weapons for this. First, we have the LRMs, all right, and then the original Masakari Prime in the game. The LRMs weren't accounted for in the missiles. I added missile 1 to change that, and then we have the 2 ER PPCs, all right, and so I split that up into 2 even groups. So we have 30 and 30 damage for each of those. And then the overheat for that, that 30 produces 4. All right, so generally I'm using a 7 divided by 7 to determine it. So I have 3 in there, that should be 4. And then the heat generated by that is 30, and I divide that by 5, which is actually going to generate 6, all right? But if we notice over here, the primary weapons are only producing 34 heat, and it has dissipating 40. And so I carried that on over here to bring that down to the 25 or 24 plus a walking and running, and so that was divided out to 5 instead of 6, all right? And then the primary attack for that was actually 4, all right? So we had the 30 divided by that, and what we're finding was that makes sense, all right? And so we have the basically 2 mirror abilities, so we're firing the LRM-10 and 2 ERPPCs with our primary attack, and then the 2 other ERPPCs are going to be our overheat option. And so we can hop back over to the template now, and let's see how all that looks in the card. All right, so this is what I first plugged into my card. All right, so we got that 4 primary attack. We have the 4 attack from the overheat. 5 is the damage coming from that. I did long range 2, all right, because we have 2 ERPPCs in that primary, and really I'm giving 1 long range value for each weapon that has a range greater than 21. Plugged in the targeting computer, even though it doesn't really do anything at this point. It's just kind of to be there, to something to look at. And then we plugged in the armor and structure at 3 and 9. Now I did kind of play with the costing a little bit, all right, so you can kind of see where my head was going there. I always do 1M for every type of munition that it carries, unless it carries an excessive amount of one particular type, and then I might do 2. And then usually I add some logistics for kind of the much larger mechs, and then that assembly is kind of, once you get past the first couple, the assembly is just kind of there to be there, and I was entertaining that here. So this is what I came up with, but we had a problem with this, all right? And that was that the ERPPCs are in the overheat as well, and technically they would give long range as well, all right? So would that be a long range of 4? And so what I did is I came up with this alternate configuration. So I just kind of broke the rules because that's the way I roll. I'm not really confined by the rules of the original game for my home rules, my home game and my home cards. So what I did with this, and so I just said for the overheat, you're getting +4 attack and you're getting long range +2. So there you go. All right, so a little bit of flavor, a little bit different, a little bit of break from the norm of the original game, but it fits in with what the mech is doing, all right? It's ERPPCs in the primary and it's ERPPCs in the overheat, and so the benefit from each should be the same. All right. Now let's get into the analysis, all right? Because this is where things get really interesting, all right? And so I costed this out. I ended up coming up with this 7. And now these things are always flexible. You know, it may end up being an 8 or so after playtesting. Who knows, it may be up to 9. I don't think so, though. It's definitely not going to be a 6, all right? So we have 7, 2A, 1L, 1M. But what's interesting is this. Let's compare this to the original card. All right, so this mech, the Masakari Prime, in the original release of the game is absurd, all right? Nobody's gonna pay 13 for this mech, and the fact that it has 10 damage output plus a 3 overheat is insane, all right? And so the way in my complete redesigns, almost none of my mechs are getting into that point where they can dish out 13 damage, even if they're completely overheating alpha striking, all right? I can't even think of any that go much beyond maybe 9 or 10 off the top of my head, all right? And generally, and for the primary, most of the big mechs are peaking out around 5, all right? And so things like the Direwolf, I believe my Direwolf Prime is sitting around 5. There are some other mechs that might scoot up to a 6 or 7, something like the Burrock, but that mech also has a little ability that I put in to restrict who it can assign the damage to, because those are all super short range weapons. I believe it's heavy medium pulse laser or something like that. This kind of attack value inflation is what drove the initial cost issues in that original release of the game, therefore making these fun units that we want to play because we want the card game to represent the tabletop game, which is what we love. And also we don't want cards in the game that can't be played, all right? So in all my redesigns here, I'm just kind of figuring out a way that, you know, I can play my home game and have fun and play the cards, the mechs that I love playing, all right? Because there's 2 reasons that you may want to play this game. 1, because you love playing the card game and you love the challenge of the card game, and 2, because you want it to be a proxy for Battletech, all right? And so unless I'm in a tournament, which don't exist right now, the way I want to play this is I want it to be a proxy for BattleTech. All right, I want to be able to play BattleTech with cards and have a game that lasts 25 to 40 minutes instead of a tabletop game which is going to last a couple hours, and I still get to play with the mechs that I enjoy and I have fun with. All right, and so what happened in the original game is the original game costed weapons or gave weapons greater attack value if they had greater range. All right, and so it basically inflated the cost of those weapons, the longer range they are. So an ERPPC, which is a weapon that has a lot of range, therefore increased the attack value of that weapon. Now the problem I see with that, and kind of my own kind of way of interpreting things into the trading card game, is that I have, in all my experience in playing the tabletop, I've had very few experiences where a slow, heavy mech dictates the range that it's engaging its opponents. All right, so unless it's engaging other slow, heavy mechs, all right, in which case both of them are benefiting from those big, heavy weapons with long range. If it's engaging smaller mechs, those smaller mechs are going to close the range pretty darn quick to what's ideal for them so that they can engage this large target, which they maybe shouldn't have been engaging in the first place. But either way, if you are going to engage, you want to damage it. All right, and so maybe at most you're getting one turn where you can take a shot at a mech where you're in range and they are not, but who's to say that you're even hitting with that? All right, and the attack values in all the mechs in the trading card game are essentially a proxy for a longer battle. All right, it's not accounting for one shot, it's accounting for the aggregates of shots over the course of a battle. All right, and if you're fighting a mech that has shorter range, less powerful weapons, that mech's not going to sit around where you can take advantage of those big guns for a lot of extra turns. All right, and so it's going to close that range. And so this idea of inflating the attack value of these longer range weapons, these heavier weapons in the card game, and then reflecting that in the attack value on the card, I think is a mistake that the original card designers make. And since I'm not playing this competitively right now, I'm not entering any tournaments, I'm gonna adjust the game and adjust the rules so that I can enjoy playing BattleTech with cards. All right, and that means changing how the weapons are treated. And so then we get what's suddenly a much more playable card. All right, and so we have my version of the Warhawk Prime. And so the cost of that, brings it down. I think the cost, according to the calculations from the original game, put it around a 9, and actually we can check that real quick. All right, so I plugged in the values here. All right, so we have a 3, a 9, 4 attack, 1 missile. I generally ignore the first missile, all right, in my thing, so that'll be notable. Overheat 5 plus 4, and then coming down here, and let's plug in that long range of 4. All right, so this calculation, all right, based on the old trading card game, puts us just shy of 9 points. All right, now let's go back again and say I always ignore the first missile. All right, I consider that's a freebie if you have it, and then that puts us down at 7.9, and I'm going to round that down, all right, for any units that have more than 2 buyouts. All right, and so now taking those considerations and then looking at our mech, all right, so the costing based on the old formula told us we are at a 9, all right. I always ignore the first missile, all right, and I consider that first missile covered by the munitions, all right, and then anytime there's more than 2 buyouts, I'm counting that as worth 1 point as well, all right, so that's bringing us down to 7, all right, so basically adding that logistics in there justified us bringing the base cost down to 7, all right, so the opportunity cost is that you have to include logistics in your deck, or you have to include a card that's going to provide logistics so that you can save that 1 buyout. Otherwise, just play AMT or whatever it may be, AMP, probably not AMP, and pay 8 for it instead, or figure out a way to get logistics in there, and you can only pay 7. So that's it, all right. So that's kind of the justification. This is the card. I believe this card is very playable within the game, all right. It may need to be tweaked. Obviously, anytime that you are coming out with the cost, you need to play test it first. I'll put it in this home game, and if suddenly this seems like it's a little bit too good at a cost of 7, then I'll bump it up on 8, and I'll play with it on 8. I'll print it up on my printer, play it again, and keep going. And other people can do the same if you're following along with this and you want to kind of print out some of these and play with them in your own game so that you can enjoy awesome mechs like the Warhawk Prime, not the Masakari, you Intersphere scum, the Warhawk Prime, put it on the table and play with it, and be able to play with that without trying to figure out how to get 13 resources, all right? And let's take a moment and we can compare it with the Warhawk A. And this mech does get played, all right? It does get played as that kind of 1 or 2 heavy hitters that people might put in the deck. Probably not top tier competitive, but certainly a casual one. The cost is only 10 with an A&M. The attack is a little bit more reasonable at that 8, all right, which happens to align with the total of the primary and overheat in our mech. It has 310. I'm not sure why that's 310 and the other ones are 39. I might have to look. It might just be kind of a mistake that was made in kind of the original design. But either way, this mech looks very similar to my mech that I produced. All right, this mech happens to be playable in the game. My mech is a little bit cheaper and it splits its primary attack between an overheat that will damage the mech and the primary attack value of 4. So you can decide. What's better? Is Travis's, custom way better than the original? Sure, all right, so use whatever works best for your home game and what you can enjoy and what you can play with the mechs that you enjoy playing with the most, all right? But that's me, this is Travis, signing off. I hope you enjoyed this. Go ahead and hop onto the Patreon for Renegade HBG if you want to see a little bit of extra cards like this. I do share some more of my customs there than I do kind of share publicly on the Facebook or on my Instagram, or on this channel as well, and I'll include the Warhawk as one of the ones that I kind of share there. But yeah, give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribing and, more importantly, sharing with other people if you think they would be interested in this content as well. But thanks a lot, and I'll catch you on the next episode. If you have a mech that you would like to see in that next episode, put it down in the comments below, and I'll consider adding it and sharing with you guys. Bye.